Okay.
Alright, so for truth tables, P will represent a statement, and then in the truth table you have every possible combination. If you have one statement, it's either true or it's false. So if you're going to complete a negation column, the negation is of course our squiggle. The squiggle is going to have the opposite truth value in the truth table. So if the statement started out true, it becomes false. If it started out false, then it would become true. So the truth table again shows all the possible combinations without actually having a statement for what P is. P could be, you are American. And we could fill it in accordingly. What do we have over here? All right, you don't need that. I think you get it. All right, our conjunction, which is our and, tells us that P and Q together will only be true when both P and Q are true separately. So when you combine them with a conjunction, which is an and, if you have one true and one false, together the whole statement is false. So a true and true will be true. All of the others have at least one false, therefore making the whole statement together false. So the little trick I remember or have students jot down for the and is that two trues is true. Everything else you just assume is false for an and. And there are little tips like that if you jot them down at the top and memorize them, it'll help you to do the truth tables. All right, the disjunction or the or. The or is only false when both P and Q are false at the same time. And this is because you're doing one or the other. So when you're looking at an or, as long as one of them is true, it will be true. So true or true would be true. True or false, one of them is true, so you keep the true statement. Next one of them is true, we keep the true statement. But in the last one, since both of them are false, and you compare those with an or false is false. The little trick for this one is that I say two falses are false, everything else is true. And then eventually we're going to learn the arrow rule and the double arrow rule, but first we're just going to work on these. Now, unfortunately on the back, I did not give you the templates for the tables. So you'll have to draw them. It doesn't have to have a box around the outside, it could just be like a table. You don't need this part around. But I will always give you the templates. I don't know why I didn't on this note sheet, I apologize. And I'll always fill in the first couple columns for you. Now, the more letters you have, the more columns and rows you're going to have as well. So if we had like P and Q, we'd have to come up with all the possible combinations of P and Q. If we had P, Q, and R, we'd have to come up with all the possible combinations of trues and falses, so it ends up getting a lot longer. All right, now when you're completing the truth table, the first column will be filled in for you, which is just the general statement. You eventually want to get your last line to be negation P and P. But sometimes you have to create other columns first to help you get there. So I would need to create a negation P column. Remember, negation, squiggle, is just the opposite. So the opposite of true is false. The opposite of false is true. Now I'm ready, I have a negation P, I have a P column, I'm ready to go straight to, so the last part of it, like this is almost like your working up to your final column. We're going to compare the negation P and the P column with the AND, or our conjunction. The rule for AND is that two trues are true, everything else is false. So when we compare these, true and false together would be false. False and true together would still be false. So our last column, and the last column is the one that like matters, but the other parts help you get to that. They will get longer. We're starting off easy.
Negation P. So what are you comparing?
I'm comparing this and this.
Okay.
So this column and this column.
And second.
So I said true and false together when you put
Right.
this. A true statement and a false statement together
Is false.
is false.
False and true statement.
A false and a true, one of them is false, so it's a false.
Okay. I didn't know what you were comparing. Okay.
Yes, you're comparing the final statement, which was negation P and P, which was the two previous statements. Okay. Now the next one is negation Q. So we start out with Q, so go ahead and construct a little table. Q only has two options, it's either true or false. Most of you will understand that if you negate it, it's false, and then you negate it again, it's going to be true. But in a truth table, you are showing work in the table. So we would start out with, the work is the columns. All the columns to get you to your final answer. They're going to get a lot harder than this. I'm just starting off with like one variable ones. So first we'll do negation Q. Okay, which is like the inside part of our parentheses. So negation is just the opposite. The opposite of a true statement is false. The opposite of a false statement is true. Now we have a column that does this, so we can now do the final answer, which is negation of the negation of Q. So in the last one, I took the opposite of this column. In this one, I'm going to negate the negation. So I'm actually going to take the opposite of this column, which gets you right back to where you started. True, negation of false, true would be false. So it actually gets you right back to the starting point. It's logic.
Figures and apples.
All right, now the next ones have P's and Q's. And let me just draw this with you so that you understand how to set it up. When you have P and Q, I will always give you these columns. It's just a fluke that somehow they didn't get on this paper. So you don't have to know how to set these up. But in the first one, you'll put two trues and two falses. You'll have four possible combinations instead of two. So we have true events. And then in the next column, you will alternate true, false, true, false. When you don't need to know how to set this up, I will give this to you. But this has covered all of the possible combinations. True, false, just mean true, 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 false, false, true, and false, false. So we have everything examined. Now, the whole goal is to be able to compare these two things at the end of your table. So that's what our goal is. So I do have a P column, so that's good. I do not have a negation Q column. So that's something I would want to add in. Negation Q. Negation Q is going to take the opposite of the Q column. So this would be false, true, false, true. So now we have one of each. I have a P column, I have a negation Q column. You can go to your final answer or final column, which will be P or negation Q. So in this case, and you may want to go and circle these, you are comparing the P column with the negation Q column. So this Q, regular Q column, you're actually not even using, you just used it to get your negation Q column. So we're comparing those two things that I've circled. We're using the OR rule, okay? Which the OR rule was that everything's true except when you have two falses. So I usually jot down two falses is false. Everything else will be true. So we compare these two. True or false would be true. True or true would be true. False or false, this one will be false. And false or true will be true. So our final column should be TTFT.
I'm reading this test.
All right. Next one. Again, I'll just keep setting this up with you because I think it makes it easier since you don't have them on your paper. Make a P column and a Q column. Start out with TTFF and then alternate TFTF in the second column. And again, that will normally be filled in for you. If you look at the homework, you'll see it's already filled in. Now, what do you think my next column would be to get to this?
It's negation P.
Negation P. Well, we don't see negation P actually.
It's distributed.
We don't use distributive property with the logic.
So you just.
We already have a P column. We already have a Q column.
You just go to the final answer.
So it's almost the whole one. We're going to start on the inside first. So we'll start with the P and Q. Then we'll be able to do the negation of that column, which will be our final answer. So you have to work your way inside out. So you have to find out what P and Q is, and then we'll take the opposite of it. All right, so in this column, we're using the AND rule. The AND rule tells us that the statement will be true if you have two truths. So two truths are true. Everything else will be false because you're looking at an AND. They have to both be true at the same time to be true. So we should have true and true is true. All of the other ones will be false because they have one false. You just have to be careful because the and and the or are like completely opposite rules, right? So you just have to make sure you're keeping organized. Now the last column, all we're adding in is we're negating this column. We're taking the opposite of this. So the opposite of a true is a false. And then the opposite of all of these falses will be a true. Bless you. All right, the last one's going to get a little bit longer because you will see there are some squiggles on the actual letters. So again, set up your starting table. We need a P and a Q. Same setup, two trues and two falses in the P column. And then alternate true, false in the Q column. And that's just a way to organize every time so that you always get every possible combination. Now we need to get each little piece so that we can combine them with any of our conjunctions or disjunctions. So looking through, we have a P column. We need a negation Q column. So we would negate the Q column. All you do is take the opposite value of the Q. So this would be false, true, false, true. Give yourself a check. You now have that column. Now you want to work your way inside out. So now we go to what's inside the parentheses, which is our P and negation Q. So we are going to be comparing this time the P column and the negation Q column with the AND rule, aka the TP. AND rule tells us that it's only true when you have two truths. Two truths is true. So we go through. We have one false, so that's false. We have two truths, that's true. We have two falses, that's false. We have at least one false, that's also false. The last step then will be to take the negation of this whole thing, which is our final step. And all we're doing here is we're negating the previous column. So that's just your opposite. True, false, true, true. Just be careful because I know some of your T's will look like F's and F's will look like T's. So just be careful when you're doing it on a quiz that you know. Alright, try the closure on your own. And the first two columns I will be giving you, like I normally have. See if you can figure out what columns you need to create in. And then the homework is, you do need to go to page 139, I think, to see what the questions are. But I've given you a worksheet in the next page of your packet that has the tables already constructed, so you don't have to draw them all out.
It's really not that hard.
It is not hard. They're just rules that you have to memorize, like how to apply the logic to it.